Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And we want to welcome again Alex from Canada. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for delivering another beautiful teaching of the knowledge of the creator and the process of creation. We see your screen.
Hello?
Yes, we see your screen, Alex. Can you hear us?
One moment, please.
And of course, while he's fixing something in the background, we just want to remind everybody to keep enlightening the negotiators and all these teams that are in Vienna. The process is not over. It's continuing on, and we've experiencing some success, and we will continue to have more successes as we do our part, and that is the enlightenment of the souls of the individuals that are there in this process of negotiations for peace and pledging the nations to peace in exchange for advanced space technology. Alex, are you ready?
Thank you very much, Mark. I have to reconnect my soul. And I want to welcome everybody to this North American Corona team meeting on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And I thank you so much for your support over the years. And today is the day after Christmas. And so there's a lot of meaning, a lot of emotion that is carried with it, a lot of memories, especially childhood memories. And I really want to thank everybody for being here and allowing me to proceed with this presentation. This is a presentation of the Keshe Foundation TV Spaceship Institute, and our goal is to have science meet the soul of man for the purpose of peace. And that was our original objective many decades ago, and it continues to be so as we are on the path to seeing the fruits of this labor. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute, teaching in plasma science. This part is the advanced knowing stage. And today I would like to talk about nanobiology. My name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It is December 26, 2021, and this is the Keshe Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. And that, of course, includes the Hispanic states, the state of Canada, and the state of the United States. And we still have the United States of emergency emerging, as this is not funny. They are still suffering from, we're all suffering from the state of pandemic. Some add to this the mudslides, the flooding, the tornadoes, and all sorts of discomforts that go along with it. However, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's starting to emerge. And the reason for that is because all the souls are converging for the purpose of peace on this planet. And in the process of doing so, many are aware or becoming aware, but very, very many are not aware at all. And we can't wait. We have to move forward, but we don't want to leave anybody behind. So we're leaving some tracks in our path. We had a basic teaching program, which was basic, advanced, and intermediate. And we have an understanding program, basic, intermediate, and advanced. We're in the final stages of the knowing program, where we have basic, intermediate, and advanced. And today's topic is nanobiology. And there was a line drawn in the sand. And the reason for that is because things are not the same. We have the technology, and a lot of people are suffering as a result of the lack of advancement of the technology. So is it for lack of trying, or is it through obstruction? Well, we're going to keep trying. This is not a commentary, this is a teaching. So I want to welcome everybody to the Plasma Gen Travel Agency. As you know, you were all born to Earth, but many don't know how, or don't care to know how they were born to Earth. And of course, you were born for a reason. There's always a reason, but too many don't know why, or don't care to know why. But they want to travel to Mars. And by the extension, they don't know how, and they don't know why again. And they don't care to know why, because they were not born to Mars in the first place. They were born to Earth. And so there was a reason. And another state that needs to be taken down is the state of ignorance. And ignorance has two meanings. One is just to be unaware, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're unaware, then there's a way to learn and become aware. But if you're aware and unwilling, well, that's being ignorant. Okay, so this is what makes it so difficult to cross the bridge. And we have crossed the bridge because it's time to get dirty. Yes, it is, because the cleanup process can be a messy thing. However, we don't have all the answers. We're traveling into uncharted skies at the moment, and we all like to follow a leader. And in today's teaching, I'm the teacher and I'm the leader, but I have a confession as I'm a student. I'm going into uncharted territories. And the main dependence that we've had throughout history, and we keep saying it all the time, is that seeing is believing. But we're not exactly sure what we're seeing. We really have to sort it out. And so that's what these classes are all about. And as we proceed to complete the advanced knowing series and cross the bridge into the new science, the new tomorrow, we're not interested in just going alone. We have a lot of people and a lot of souls who need to come with us. So we are in the post December 21st, 2021 era, the coming of Mitra. This is the new tomorrow, and is a continuation of the teachings of Maran Tevakolikesh. And so I welcome you to the Plasma Gen Travel Agency, where those of us and all of us who are born to Earth, we know that we're soul travelers. And now we also know that we were born for a reason, and that reason is to be universal functionaries. So please proceed to the departure lounge lounge. I hope we have a nice trip today, because we're going to be going into understanding more about our souls, the soul of man. That's you. That's the essential you. And the essential you comes from this interaction between the plasmagen state and the mattergen state. Then, of course, there's the soul of the body. That's a surrogate you. And that's an interaction between the plasmagen state and the environment state, which is the small m matter state. And the key word here, interaction. The interaction is what it's all about. Book number 1 was the universal order of creation of matters. And it shows on the cover of the book the bringing together of the matter, dark matter, and antimatter. This is the creation of matter. And it's also the creation of the universe. And how it arrived to us is through what we call principal matter. Well, this principal matter came to us in the form of PM ticks. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, although not in such terminology. What we're going to be talking about is the creation of force fields which represent the interaction of principal matter with other force fields, with other PM ticks. And the combinations thereof create a balanced condition called a maggrav. And many of you have heard this repeatedly. And as such, this review is very good because it helps you become teachers as well, because this is important to carry this message and to understand within you what this message means. It's then that you can transfer this knowledge of creation, this knowledge of understanding that the dreams, hopes, and aspirations of what humanity wants, which is the freedom and emancipation of humanity and the entrance into the universal community. Is that your point of view, or is that my point of view? Well, I think it's everybody's point of view, because not only do we want to know how we got from here to there, but we want to know where we're going from here to somewhere else, because the structure of light is always in motion, isn't it? And we see that at some point there was an origin of the universe, and at some point it was created into matter. But is the origin of the universe from the creation of matter, or is the creation of matter from the origin of the universe? And so that may sound confusing, because fundamentally what you want to know is the creation of the universe, and rightfully you should know that, because if you don't know that, then what are you doing here? So we need to know how the universe is created, and it's nice to be able to understand that it's actually quite simple. Well, when you say it simply, the universe exists from energy. And because this energy is always in motion, is always positive. So the thing that matters is the charge, because that reflects the energy in motion, the charge. So when we come together with the creation of matter, as we see in the cover of book number 1, that is a plasma state. But when you have two plasma states, they interact together, and it makes a very nice, neat package. So fundamentally, to explain to someone, a new student, the magnetical forces deal with attraction and repulsion. Those are the two main forces of creation. And the creation actually comes from a maggrav condition. This maggrav condition comes from the balance of the attraction and repulsion. So the creation is plus the magnetical energy, but the other way is what we call natural decay. And that's an unfortunate term, but what it means is a reduction in field strength, a reduction in energy. And so it comes from a repulsion attraction combination, which we call a maggrav. plus the gravitational. So in other words, from our MAGRAV position, what we emit as a magnetical force, or what we emit as a gravitational force, is part of the MAGRAV condition. However, what we absorb contributes to our gravitational force, which increases our strength. And so isn't it interesting that by increasing our gravitational force, we call that natural decay? Either way, when we look at the model of ray creation, we see the neutron, how it breaks up into the electron-proton combination, which we call an atom. And in that process, we release a PM tick, which is what we started with, the energy in motion, a ray, it's created. And from that position, here we go. It's a two-way street. So we can go from a decaying position to a creating position, or we can go from a creating position to a decaying position. But it's all the same. It's all the same. Our position in physicality is the decayed position. And from that, we can create in both directions. So whatever we create is a magnetical residue. And if that residue is created gravitationally, then the convergence of that energy is a physical residue. And if that residue is a divergence, then it becomes a magnetical energy. And of course, we are the independent variable, but the same rule applies. The universe has numerous independent variables. So our independence is dependent on the independence of other variables. So it is, our independence is interdependent to the rest of the universe. And thank God the rest of the universe is peaceful. We just have a problem here. And that's why we've introduced the cups of life to facilitate that, to teach us how to do this, to teach us the basics. And we started with the 1 cup. And the reason for that, it was the 1 cup of life, not the 1 cup of pandemic. But that's what it was introduced for. But also as a teaching mechanism to show how we can take a physical zinc plate, physical copper coil, and a physical nano-coated copper coil and create a magnetical gravitational field combination. And then we've realized that we have 2 cups. One is emotional and one is physical, even though both were created physically. And the reason for that was, again, because of the current situation on this planet. So if we're still dealing with that, please keep creating these cups of life and keep them at least 1 meter apart, because there is an emotional component and there's a separate physical component. However, when they all work together, first of all, inside each cup, there's a combination of energies. So from there, we can create gases, amino acid, water, and all sorts of energies that emanate beyond the physical limitation of the cup. And then these cups all work together. So each individually have a magnetical gravitational relationship and a soul. And collectively, each cup has a magnetical, gravitational, and a soul. And to review these cups, of course, we have the cup of the soul on top. In the middle, we have the cup of emotion and the cup of physicality. And on the bottom, we have the cup of inertia and the cup of earth. And of course, we see that our emotion and our physicality connects our environment as indicated by the cup of inertia and the cup of the earth with our soul as indicated by the cup of the soul. And so all of this is reflected in our periodic table of elements. And so as we've been going through these teachings, and we've reorganized this periodic table of elements to reflect this, well, we've taken the two columns on the right and added them there. They came from the left, we brought them to the right. And so the ones that we have been talking about in these basic teachings, hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen, which are the components of amino acids, copper and zinc, which are the cups of man, iron, which is our connection to the environment. We have sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium salts. And then today I'd like to talk a little bit more about phosphorus and chlorine, but primarily phosphorus. There is one thing I would really like to draw your attention to, that if there's something odd about these two. In fact, if you take hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, chlorine, and sodium, they are all odd. The numbers that they have are what we call odd numbers, and they reflect the number of proteins in there. And then from there, we have the elemental understanding of physics. But that's not how things work. All things work in combination. So this is a good reference point to start with. But what we're going to look at is the role of phosphorus. And so before we get into that, I'd just like to review some pH observations. So we know that when we talk about the pH table, which is the potentiation of hydrogen, saturated fat is acidic. But this fat is necessary because it encapsulates toxins. Polyunsaturated fat is alkaline. And we know that oil and water do not mix. Fat is oily. But we do know that highly alkaline water will emulsify fat. And then we also know that NH3 is ammonia. And what is interesting here is that oxygen is absent. What does that mean? Because ammonia is very alkaline, and alkalinity has a lot of oxygen. And then we have the nanostate is created from caustic, which is really highly alkaline. And then we have carbon, which is the connector. So how does this affect everything? So as this is an advanced knowing class, and I don't want to scare people away because it is getting more and more technical, and rightfully so. However, we talk about the basic dimensions of transmission, the x-axis, transition, the y-axis, transmutation, the z-axis. But what we are seeing is we see the effect of rotation, we see the polarity, we see the field strength, we see the position created, and then we see the interaction of positions created. And when we say that we see it, yeah, we actually see it. We can see it in physicality, all of these things. But what we can't see is what causes these things. And what we can't see is we can't see energy in motion, right? You can hold a battery, and a battery can hold energy, but you don't know how much energy is in that battery, do you? Until you interact, until you physically interact. So the energy is non-visible, and it carries a charge, and it goes through various dimensions. So we have physical dimensions, such as the ranges on this planet. we have emotional dimensions and we have soul dimensions. And all of these dimensions are structured in a kind of geometry which reflects the capability of creation and co-creation and transcendence, which is the way to move through various energy fields. And so today, I just like to keep a complex subject as simple as possible. So I'd like to discuss 4 distinct sections of nanobiology. And the first one is, what does it mean to be a crossover? So when we look at transmutation and the subject of transmutation, we know that cells are created. So what we're looking at here is the structure of a cell. In other words, the perimeter of the cell is created by 2 rows of phospholipids, and they stand like little soldiers protecting the cell, protecting from the inside and from the outside. And then within each cell, we have RNA and DNA, which is the code for the cell. And although we have over 70 trillion cells in our body, which are all different, the DNA code is the same in every cell. Well, if the DNA is the same in every cell, then the DNA is not the factor which determines the cell. And so this becomes a problem for us, because when we're dealing in 2 dimensions, we look at length and width, but that's all in a flat on-screen type, on paper type of reference, and it's in straight lines. And so one of the formulas that we do to discuss these 2 dimensions is the relationship between the diameter of a circle and the letter pi. Pi, which is rounded out to 3.14, which means if we take 3.14 times the diameter of the circle, we will go from a straight line geometry to a circular geometry. But the problem with pi is it's an irrational number. In other words, there is no pi. You have to make the pi, you have to fudge it. And that's a fudge factor. And so this is a mathematical fudging of the science. But somehow, when we look at this point, this vanishing point, and if we relate it to our physicality, we say, well, we don't know if we're in hell or in heaven. And that's because we're looking along the horizon. Well, is heaven up and hell down? Well, then we're looking across the horizon. But there's a crossover point. And that's what we're talking about now. So this crossover point is the determination between what we call transmission, which is along the horizon, right? And it involves rotation. That's like the rotation of the Earth. And then there's transition, which goes through the poles, right? And yesterday, I guess Santa Claus came from the North Pole. So he knows which way he's going. Well, actually, he's probably, not only is he probably on his way back, he's probably already kicking his feet up and having a hot chocolate. So there was a crossover point, and this becomes our perpendicular vanishing point, the perpendicular target between the transmission and transition fields. And we say, well, how do we get into the circular aspect of it? So we use pi. But all what that does not account for is how we get into our soul dimensions or how we get into our emotions. And so that requires target practice. So if we take a look at these fields, which is the transmutation, which is the z-axis, then we quickly discover that we now have to go into a third dimension, that it has to be a sphere. So to explain the energy transactions, we have to think in 3 dimensions, but try and describe them in 2 dimensions. So it's a bit of a challenge. So the 2 dimensions, the direction of flow and the strength of flow. And that is determined by the gradient charge versus the charge gradient. So in other words, the direction of flow, you need to know if you're going positive or negative. But the other thing, are you going quickly or slowly? And what is your susceptibility? Well, so the susceptibility is determined by how these plasma fields interact. So first of all, you have to have a plasma field of a certain strength to determine its position, but then you have to have a dynamic plasma interaction which reflects the strength. And when you have multiple plasmas coming together, they interact and they build. And that's called synergy. So depending on the synergy and the susceptibility, you now have a reference point for a relationship. And it is from this relationship now that you know that on Earth, we can transcend into higher energy levels because we've seen that. We've seen the form artifact of what we're talking about. We haven't seen the energy. In other words, we've held the battery, but we haven't held the energy that's in the battery. We don't know how much energy is in there. That is all dependent on field strength. Well, if we're only dependent on one dimension, then we have a problem. And science does have a problem because science, by definition, as we've said before, is determined by the verification and validation of scientific principles by man-made means. Well, right off the bat, you have a limitation because the verification is your transmission and the validation is your transition and your point of existence, and you know you exist, that's your transmutation. But scientifically, this is all based on confirmation of your physicality. Well, we discussed in our physicality the study of microbiology and how that was on the leeward side of our bridge of knowing. Well, today we're going to go into nanobiology because we have to understand that the old science is still stuck in a box, and that box is in a range between 1 times 10 to the 6th, which is 6 orders of magnitude, down to 10 to the minus 6th, which is 6 orders of magnitude in the other direction. So within that range of +6 and -6 is the old science. And that works well with linear math and linear structures. But once you get into the nanotechnology, which is 10 to the -9th, or you get into the gigatechnology, which is 10 to the +9th, and what is interesting is that when you have 10 to the -9th, based on surface to volume ratios, you have more energy transfer. So the higher the energy, shall we say, the more giga energy that you have, it would have to come from a nano source. So this is one of the reasons people in power like us to do more and more with less and less until we come to the point where we can do everything with nothing. But today, we're going to introduce pico, which is another 3 orders of magnitude smaller than nano, which is another 3 orders of magnitude stronger than nano. And as such, the opposite is tera, which is another 3 orders of magnitude stronger than giga. And in the process of doing this, there's a tendency to curvature. So the straight line geometry is done. That's the old science stuck in a box. We have to go outside the box and learn about the curves. So when we look at what it means in terms of size and have a perspective of what it means for size, the genome within the DNA is 0.3 nanometers. And these calculations are just rough for reference, just so that we can have a discussion, because we're not scientists. We're just ordinary human beings trying to get a life on this planet. And the alpha helix, which is made from these genomes, is 1 nanometer. So there we are, there's your nanometer. And that's smaller than a DNA, which is 2 nanometers. But, you know, the DNA is twice as large as the alpha helix. And then you look at a virus, like a polio virus, for instance, it is 30 nanometers. And we know there's a difference between viruses and bacteria, and it's enormous. The bacteria is like 1,000 nanometers. Well, 1,000 nanometers is 1 millimeter. And then you look at blood cells, which are an order of magnitude higher still, 10,000 nanometers. And then you look at the cross-section of a hair, and it is 80,000 nanometers, almost another order of magnitude higher. So this kind of gives you a perspective of what's going on inside you. And gastronascens, who I spoke about before, had a microscope, which he called a somatoscope, and he was able to do something very interesting. And that was that he was able to see the results of changing the pH. And one of the problems by changing the pH was that the DNA would change its conformity in different pHs. So in other words, if you had a healthy pH in your blood, which was slightly alkaline, the DNA was perfectly normal, and therefore the body was perfectly healthy. But if you became slightly acidic with respect to healthy blood serum pH, you became unhealthy. But what caused this was a slight extension of the DNA. In other words, it was elongated. And as such, you can see that the distance between the waves in the DNA was greater. These waves we call are the helix. Now, what happens if you get more unhealthy? Well, at some point, if you don't reverse that, then you will be dead. And we know that because when we look at the DNA of a cadaver, it's flatlined. And in that condition, it's highly anaerobic. And anaerobic means that something funny happens. And so we talk about energy. So we talked about the charge gradient and the gradient charge, right? So the direction of flow and the field strength. And so it affects the lifespan. And so when you lose this vitality within your body, and heaven forbid that you die, the bacteria that facilitated your life, which we call aerobic bacteria, changes into anaerobic bacteria and decomposes your body. And we know that because when there's an accident on the highway and someone runs over, let's say, an animal, which we call roadkill, that will decompose in 9 days if it's not removed. And the reason for that is because the bacteria that is within the intestines, which facilitates the digestion of food, becomes anaerobic and starts to digest the host. And the virus is an energy pack. And this, as an energy pack, just like a PM tick, it goes from host to host. And so which host does it go to? So Gastonasons had a microscope, and in the top half of this picture, you see the lenses as they're positioned above a platen where he's looking at a blood sample. And his capability was that he was able to see a live blood culture. Now, what's been amazing in the recent times, that there have been microscopes allowed to see live blood culture. But the difference is that many of these are of a lower magnification. And before I get into that, what I want to point in the bottom half of this picture is the amalgamation of two light sources, which come together and create a form artifact. And it is this capability that allows this microscope to see, in this case, this picture you're looking at is 30,000 magnification. And what you're looking at on the right-hand side is blood cells. And you see 3 blood cells where there's clumping. There's no gap in between. And then you're seeing 2 blood cells where there is a gap in between and there's no clumping. Well, why is that? It's the same environment. Now, the thing is that this microscope is illegal. Well, if seeing is believing, and if this is what you're seeing, and this is illegal, then we understand the problem that we're having, that seeing is actually illegal. And if that makes sense to anybody, then I give up. That doesn't make sense to me. However, what Gastonasons was able to do, by changing the pH of the environment, he was able to metamorphosize bacteria into a virus. And then he was able to take a virus and return it back into a bacteria. And the first time he did this, it was an accident because he was playing around with pH altering. He repeated this accident 40 times in a row. So, if the virus needs a host, what he has demonstrated is that the host could easily be the bacteria. And if the bacteria is within a host, which in an aerobic condition facilitates digestion, and in an anaerobic condition facilitates digestion of the host. Now you know where this is going. Welcome to the nanobiology. So the thing is that when you're looking at a gap, or when you're looking at 3 in a row, you know that there have to be opposite poles attract. So in the previous picture, we had seen 3 blood cells in a row. but these three blood cells were clumped together. Well, how can they be clumped together if they're all the same? They should be repelling. But you see, the problem is the clumping is a result of an unhealthy reaction. And when you see the gap, the no clumping, then that makes sense. And let's say in this case that those two blood cells were negative and the gap would have been positive. So you know it has to be, because when you look at the gap, and we know from plasma science that when you have this repulsion, you can take these magnets, if they're all the same charge, and push them together as much as you want. But you can't, because there's a repulsion force in between. You can't see it, but you can feel the tension from it. You can put your hand in between, and you're not going to affect that gap that you can see. However, that gap is going to remain there. So what's going on? So if we remember our friend Dino Kraspedon, the famous Brazilian mathematician, he said God was a set of mutually perpendicular lines of force. And he said that they were oscillating upon themselves. So this would be okay, because oscillation implies frequency, and frequency implies physical science. And that's what we've seen in physical science, the X, Y, and Z axis. So we understand those three dimensions very well. But if we look at this box and we rotate it slightly, just to reposition it, it can still remain a box, but we look at it from a different perspective. It looks like a hexagon. And with a hexagon, it looks like it has a center point. You still have the X, Y, and Z axis, but now you have a different kind of dimensioning formula. So what causes this repositioning? So let's get into what are called deflection. So when these two forces come together that are the same, they cannot come together. In fact, what happens, as we see in this picture, the two magnets on the bottom are together. They are attracted. If they are attracted, they have opposite charge. So one is positive, one is negative. They say two's company and three's a crowd. Well, there's a third magnet. And that third magnet, I don't know, it's either positive or it's negative. So it wants to get in the middle. Well, there's nowhere to go. So it has to be flipped over. And the way it's flipped and the way it's aligned is so that one side of the magnet has an opposite charge to the magnet that's lying down, and the other side has an opposite charge to the other magnet that's lying down. And so this all works. So let's say the bottom one on the left is negative. So then the left-hand side of the vertical magnet would be positive. And the right-hand side of the vertical magnet would be negative. And guess what? The magnet on the right-hand side is positive. So it all works. Okay, well, that explains that, doesn't it? So just by turning slightly, right, by deflecting slightly, where we have, in this case, let's say, positive at the top, and all the magnets in this hexagonal formation are with an alternating charge. So positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. But, you know, we can bring another one there, and we cannot link up these two positives. So what'll happen is they will deflect. And that deflection only has to be a slight rotation, because what was positive at the top is now negative. And what was positive at the top could have gone to the left or could have gone to the right. And we don't know which direction it went, but we know it went one way because now we have the negative on the top replacing the positive, and there's positives on the left and the right hand side. So taking those two into account gives us this result. And so if we want to know, did it twist to the left or twist to the right? Well, we have to take other things into account. So when we look at the basic DNA and we see that it is a helix, and we see that we have a perpendicular relationship with the RNA. So what you're looking at here is the vertical RNA and the horizontal DNA. And the structure of this is the sugar phosphate backbone. And the connection to the earth is the carbon that's inside this sugar phosphate backbone. And because we're in the earth in an aerobic condition, then we have to add this hydrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus to complete the picture, right? Have in our DNA. So we have a helix, hexagonal structure in our helical coil. In this particular picture, this particular product, cytosine, has no sugar. But it does have a kind of offsetting pattern there. So one side is heavier than the other, okay? So that indicates an alignment position. Then we look at thymine, and it also doesn't have sugar, but it also isn't totally balanced all the way around. So here we have CH3, which we know that CH3 actually is a sugar. And so then we look at the adenine, and it is in a hexagonal formation attached to a pentagonal formation. The pentagonal formation is the sugar. And so it's attached in a certain position. And then we have the fourth, which is guanine. And that has the same thing. It has a hexagonal formation attached to a pentagonal formation, which is the sugar. So two of these amino acids have sugar and two don't. So there's a combination of the four, and this is what they do. They create adenosine triphosphate. This is the currency of life. In other words, this structure exchanges energy. So in our biology, 36 of these, what we call ATPs, are produced from just one glucose molecule, which is a component of food. The glucose is what's in the food, and it breaks down into 36 ATP, and this is done in the environment, which we call cytochrome. And inside this environment, it could be aerobic. But if it's anaerobic, we find that something happens in one of the levels of the cytochrome. It has 3 levels, A, B, C. And in the B level, it's running short. And we all know what it's like to be short on our rent payments. When you are short, you are not producing enough for what you need, the currency of life. And so it becomes anaerobic. So here we are in a point where we've gone from aerobic to anaerobic, and something has happened, we become deficient. So if we look at our ultimate, which is the body of the man, it's made from protein. Well, where does this protein come from? So the first part where it comes from is from the amino acids, which we know is the oily film that's on top of our cups of life. And it came from the thin air. And then we understand physically from the sequencing of amino acids, we produce DNA, then produce fatty acids, then we produce protein, then we produce cells, and then we produce more complex cells. So we, as humans, are migrating from a very simple and unstable format into a very complex and very stable format, and we call that growth. And it's done, basically, we start with 3 amino acids. That's the foundation. So 1, 2, 3, that's your foundation. Comes to 4th, it folds over. It folds over. If it doesn't fold over, it's a polymer. Because it folds over, it's a protein. So being a protein, it also, in the process of folding over, produces water. Well, isn't this interesting? So this is the form artifact of the process of growing. But what it doesn't say is what causes it. The next stage of the fatty acid is you take 2 fatty acids and you link them together at a head. And then you find that this head is hydrophilic, means it loves water. The tails are hydrophobic, they don't love water, they love oil. And so this is how your skin around your cells are formed. But in order to achieve this barrier around your cells that we've seen, so we see that the hydrophilic heads are gravitational, and there are hydrophilic heads on the outside of the cell. But to make the boundary, there are hydrophilic heads on the inside of the cell, and they too are gravitational. So we find that the tails are face to face. And so both of these tails are magnetical. But we just found out that we cannot have 2 charges coming together without some kind of deflection. So there is a transition zone in between. So when we look at the structure of fatty acids, which are the components of the phospholipids, we see how they're formed. And we see that we have a carbon in the center, and on the outsides, we have hydrogen. And they come in pairs. So there's a balance. So when you have a balance, that's like a MAGRAPH position. So these are MAGRAPH positioned vertically. Then we have, on the left-hand side, we have a water-soluble aerobic part of the fatty acid. That means it has oxygen, and it's also water-soluble. And on the right-hand side, we only have the 1 hydrogen. We don't have the oxygen. So this anaerobic, and it's oil-soluble. So here we see that we have now created a gradient going from a water-soluble to an oil-soluble. That's pretty interesting. Okay, but there's something wrong with this picture. And that is that we're only seeing the 2 dimensions, length and width, flat on the page. That's not the way life is. Life is spherical. Well, how can it be spherical? So we have to do a repositioning of the hydrogen offset. And the reason we have to do that is because when we look at the link between the carbons are all the same charge. Well, how can they be attracted? They need to be repelled. And yet here it is, a structure where the carbon repels the carbon, yet it remains in a structure. Something's wrong. So we have to reposition the hydrogen. So let's look in the center here. We have the carbon, and by repositioning the hydrogen, we can create, we see this diagonal line. So maybe in our original picture, we were really wrong. This is more like it. And furthermore, we know that there's a size differential in terms of field strength between the carbon in the center and the hydrogen on the outside. So this kind of picture is better representative of the field strength relationship of the carbon to the hydrogen. However, there's still another problem, is that we still have this connection. So there's still a connection in between the two carbons somehow that's holding it together. So therefore, there must be some kind of force that is keeping this together that is not visible. And that's the point. So we know that invisible, if it's visible, that we could take three magnets which were kept apart by an invisible field. And if we took one magnet and just flipped it over, we could put it in the center to represent the charge in between. But not only that, we didn't need three magnets. In other words, to put one positive between each pair of negatives. We could just put one positive in the center and have three negatives on the outside. And why is that? Well, that is because the one in the center is of a higher field strength than the one on the outside. In other words, the one in the center is gravitational and the three on the outside are magnetical. Okay, so now we understand that. So if we have our original structure and we were to remove one magnet, we find that the structure would remain. And so we see that with magnets, right? We can play with magnets and we can see that. So this is fact. And as a matter of fact, this is a picture of magnets. And I've removed one positive magnet and there's a gap and the structure remains. But the thing is that this is like a key because it is not balanced. In fact, it's not balanced like none of the amino acids that we see in the structures of the DNA. And if we flip the pole, it's like turning the key. And so this is the business of sugar. That's what sugar does. It flips over. And the reason it does that is because it comes in odd numbers. So if we were to fill that gap in the fatty acid, where we have a carbon with two hydrogens on the outside linked up, and there's a gap in between, what is going on in that gap? So first of all, there has to be a nearness and proximity. If you're near enough, then you will have an effect. And if you're strong enough, then you will have an effect. So in this case, the fatty acid has a field force in between. And clearly you can see that if we flip this thing over, we still have the connection, but the nearness and proximity relationship between the hydrogens has changed. So instead of the carbon deflecting, it's actually repositioning. It's going through a slight rotation. And so when we look at the sequencing in the Krebs cycle, and we say, well, it's an aerobic Krebs cycle. And so we produce 36 ATP, which is the proper healthy cell conditioning, and compare that to a anaerobic Krebs cycle, which is an unhealthy cell conditioning, we find that we're missing some of these ATP. So something is happening here that is causing a reduction in our health. And it has an affinity to the Krebs cycle in terms of whether it's aerobic or anaerobic. So the unhealthy is anaerobic, that means loss of oxygen. So what's happening here? So you eat food and it phosphorylizes. It's called phosphorylation. And what literally happens is we take the terminus points, the highly reactive negative magnetical charges of the glucose, and we phosphorylate them into fructose. Now we know that we have a lot of fructose in our diet. The thing is, what I'm talking about here is fructose that we produce naturally within our bodies. So this is not fructose that we eat. This is fructose that we produce. I just want to realign this perpendicular arrangement here and show something that's twisting. So with respect to the twisting of these fatty acids, and then the fatty acids get into protein, and then the protein gets into a coil. And it is because of this deflection that begins the twisting. But because of the nearness and proximity, we can have a tightening. A tightening of what? Well, a tightening of the coils. And you know that you're making coils when you do your nano coating. But when you make your coils with the nano coating, those coils are rigid. But in the biology, these coils can be tighter and they can create tunnels, or they can contract and relax. In other words, they can be tight or they can be less tight. They can be more tight or less tight. So these are different kinds of actions of twisting. And so depending on the nature of this twisting, we find that we have different organelles and different organs. And these are all the same things that happen in our DNA. So we find by changing the pH of our DNA, we are already having a helix or a coiling. And if it's very, very tight, then we can create a tunnel effect. But if it's very, very loose, in fact, seriously loose, then it can create death. So this is now, we're starting to understand basically what's happening with our 5-cup system. So not only are we seeing the structure, the physical structure of the coil versus the plate, but we're seeing the structure of the coil that is nanocoated versus the coil that is not nanocoated. Not only that, but we're seeing the structure of the element that is coiled versus the element that is not coiled versus the element that is not nanocoated. So now we've introduced other things. And so what this means is that this is a way to provide pathways which facilitate the nearness and proximity of energy transfer, so that energy comes in, goes out, goes around, or just goes right on through. And it could go right on through as if not to interact, or it could go right on through as if through a tunnel. And so now we understand better that this all has to do with attraction of repulsion. And then once you have a balanced condition of a mag-rav which is the balance between the magnetical and gravitational field forces. From that magrav you can emit, and to that magrav you can absorb. And our field of reference on this planet is between the crust and the magnetosphere of this planet. And there's a plasma energy at the core of the planet, which interacts with the plasma energy at the core of our bodies. And the way things happen is based on susceptibility. And the question is the susceptibility of what? So we find that, well, when we have the phosphate as part of the sugar, which is connected to the carbon, this is the backbone of the energy transfer in our physicality. And so all of these are a physical representation of what? So when we look at the plasma science and how we structure the stacker units, we find the what is the plasmatic transfer of energy that is non-visible, and the higher feeds the weaker, and the higher feeds all of the weaker. And how much does it feed? Well, that depends. It depends on field strength. It depends on nearness, proximity, and susceptibility. And what does the facilitation of this? So we see that when we talk about our existence, we talk about the vertical people, which are the plants. We talk about the horizontal people, which are the animals. And we are part of the horizontal group because we walk vertically and sleep horizontally. But what we don't talk about is a classification for the bacteria. So we find that the bacteria is absolutely essential for us to convert our amino acids into protein. And this is common to the vertical people and to the horizontal people. So this is not another classification. This is part of the original two classifications of vertical and horizontal people. And if the bacteria is a host within the host and will facilitate the life of the host aerobically and change and decompose the host anaerobically, there has to be a change in the structure of the bacteria. And that is the fact that there's a relationship between the bacteria and the virus. And we know that because Gaston Masons has already proved that at least 4 decades ago. And so what that means is that when we go from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, which we can see now, and we cause a bending, and we talked about this a long time ago with respect to surface to volume ratios. If you want to know which way the charge is going, just look at the surface to volume ratio, and you find, and this is every muscle bodybuilder knows this and how to build muscles, you lift weights. And so what these weight lifting is creating a tension. So in the center, you create another negative charge. So where you had 1 positive, now you split it up into 2 positives. And if you have a transition that goes across your arm, you are now building muscle. And in the process, you're facilitating muscle contraction. The muscle contraction comes through the tightening and twisting of protein. And in the tightening and twisting of the protein, it creates a path, just like a farmer plows a field. You have a groove, and the energy follows that groove. And so this is what facilitates the rotation.
Bro, you've been talking.
So it's this bending which creates the pattern, which allows the energy to follow the field through nearness and proximity of the magnetical gravitational forces. So excuse me 1 second, please. Sorry. Let me just carry on. Okay. So how can you have this bending when you're saturated? So the way we see in the omega-3, 6 and 9, what we call the alpha linolenic acid, we remove some hydrogens. Okay, well that's pretty good. So what happens when we remove these hydrogens? How do I get, I'm sorry, 1 moment, please. Thank you very much. Okay, we got that fixed. Sorry about that. So what happens when we remove these hydrogens? Well, we facilitate a bending, don't we? Because we have 2 hydrogens on the one side which are repelling. And despite the fact that they're small hydrogens, they are stronger than no hydrogens on the other side. So there's a repelling on the outside and there's an attraction on the inside. But this is not, this is based on a minusing situation where a field was removed. And we did this 3 times. And then when we do this 3 times like this, we create a bending. And we know that when we have this protein and the bringing together, so we now have a negative charge on one side, a positive charge on the other side. We know that the positive negative balance is a hydrogen. And we know that we're creating oxygen in the center. And we know that when we create 3 oxygens, that we're going to have water. And so this is the byproduct of protein creation. And it is this folding then that allows the energy to come in and go out. Why I'm going down this path is because when we look at the DNA, we see the helical coil. And when we see the interaction, we see the folding. And we see the pathways. We see the grooves. We see the twisting. And so this is all normal. And when we look at the RNA to DNA paths, and we see that the structure of the DNA comes from the RNA, but we also know that the mRNA, which modifies the DNA, can feed back, and so the DNA will adjust. And this is how we can adjust for going to a hot climate, to a cold climate, and vice versa. So we can adjust to the environment. So in other words, the arrival here, the creation of our protein, which comes from the code of the DNA, which comes from the code of the RNA, and the amalgamation of the 2 creates a structure, which eventually ends up being into a protein, which now has to have a feedback loop coming from the environment. And so that's what the mRNA is supposed to do. And this is all done naturally. So what we're not talking about is what causes this to happen. What causes the folding over of the amino acid, and what causes the interaction of the RNA to the DNA, and what causes the interaction of the feedback from the mRNA to the DNA. What causes that? And where does it come from? And then we learn about the nanostate and the structure of the nanostate, especially in a star formation structure. And so we find that when we have more than 3 in a chain, that creates a polymer. But when we fold it over, then that creates a protein, right? But the thing about these nanocoding structures, which we call star formations, in space, we don't know which way is up. We know which way is up in Earth, but in space, it doesn't matter. All that matters is nearness and proximity. So then we find that we have energy flow, not only in 2 dimensions, but in 3 dimensions. So it doesn't become just a nanostate, but a nanosphere state. You have multiple monatomic energy flows in all sorts of directions, right? And when you have this pattern shape up, you create a pathway, and energy follows this pathway. And so this pathway not only has a crossover, not only has a deflection, but it has a twisting. So when we look at the basic relationship between our brain and our heart, and what we're doing, feeding energy off of this planet, and what are we doing physically, and what are we doing in our society? So we are transmitting energy along the horizon, and we're transitioning energy between our heart and our mind. And the transmutation therefrom doesn't just stop at the transition to the mind, but it also carries on to the transportation of the body. The body is the transportation vehicle of all of these things combined. And there is a barrier. It's called a blood-brain barrier. And this, we know, the right-hand side controls the left-hand side of the body. The left-hand side of the brain controls the right-hand side of the body. So there is a crossover. And in order to facilitate a crossover, there has to be a twisting. And then this twisting can be tighter or looser, can be aerobic or anaerobic. And what is the determination of that? So when we talk about the crossover, there are other crossovers that we have. We have arteries that cross over to veins. We have blood that crosses over to the lymph system. What is especially interesting is that the blood does not come in contact with the cells. The lymph system comes in contact with each and every cell. We already know that RNA can cross over to the DNA. We've talked about the glucose phosphorylating to fructose. We know that from fat, we create protein. And we know that from the brain, we can create brawn. Both are calcium-based. All of this are form artifacts. They're form artifacts of an interaction. They are not the cause of the interaction. In other words, there's another crossover. It's the soul of the man to the soul of the body. And this is the gravitational to magnetical relationship. So when we're talking about the nanobiology, we're talking about crossover, deflection, and twisting of energy packs, energy packs. And what are these energy packs? These are the viral essentials to life, as opposed to the viral abuse on this planet. And so we've talked about the viral dividend, and we've talked about the peace dividend, and we've talked about the capabilities of the plasma science to, shall we say, correct the transition of energy in a very, very short period of time. And we can't see how this is done, but we know that it is done because there's a hole in the GANs. The hole in the GANs that you see on the right-hand side with the GANs and the water inside this bottle is based on the susceptibility. The susceptibility of energy transfer by path length of susceptibility to nearness and proximity. You can see this. You create the cups of life, and this is one of the ways we have a feeding system. We have the spaceships. It's another feeding system. We have the magnetical giver, where the soul gives to the spirit, which gives to the body, which gives to the intention, and allows the body to give to itself. You feed yourself. You also have the taker. In other words, the soul takes from the spirit, which takes from the body. That is the feedback. And you feed back to yourself. You become your own taker. So in terms of feeding, giving is a feeding, and taking is being fed or receiving. So you can be a magnetical giver to a gravitational receiver, but you can be a gravitational giver to a magnetical receiver, because you have to go through a certain point, because field strength and charge are not the same. They just indicate the direction of flow. So the giving of or the receiving of is a susceptibility. And so the plasma feeding becomes a plasma state of internal feeding of the plasmagen as a gravitational giver to a magnetical receiver. The dynamic plasma state becomes an interactive feeding of plasmagen feeding from a magnetical giver to a gravitational receiver, right? But what happens when we're disconnected? And so the soul is your friend, and the soul is you, and the soul looks after you for your welfare. But the soul of the body and the soul of the man work together. But when they're disconnected, then you have abuse. But what happens when this connection is also contaminated, right? And so it's the same thing. When you're looking at the structure of the PM tick, and you see that there's your principal matter of the antimatter and the interactive matter of your dark matter, and it's disconnected to the physical matter, which is represented and supported by the mattergen, the matter energy levels, then you find that we've got trouble. However, they say that dead men tell no tales. Well, it's an interesting thing that's just happened. I call them the tales of the morgue. We have been told that we have a non-active virus. A virus is an energy pack. So a non-active virus, and if a virus is an energy pack, and energy inside the battery is also an energy pack. But if the battery doesn't have any energy, you would say you have a dead battery. So a virus is always active. Nothing is nothing. Something is always something, as opposed to something else. So there's no such thing as a non-active virus. And how do you know that? Because a virus needs a host. And as we found, there's a relationship between viruses and bacteria. So a host is looking for another host. Our virus is looking for a host or another host. And we know that these viruses are not transmissible to cadavers. And how do we know that? Well, when we were in Iran, we had trouble with the number of patients in the intensive care. There were so many of them, and they were coming, going so quickly, we couldn't grasp a number on that. So we didn't look at the intensive care numbers. We went to the morgue to look at the morgue numbers. And within a matter of days, the number of daily mortalities dropped from 85 down to 25. And it continued down to 0. And it's done that since July of 2020. Now, what's really interesting is this highly contagious pandemic situation has not shown itself in the mortician population. So when we're looking at the tales of the morgue, we find that the morticians have not succumbed. The virus lives in a living host. Morticians deal with cadavers. So now we understand the difference when we're looking at the transcendence of energy in what we have, the pre-amino acid stage, which is the aminogen, or the post-amino acid state, which is the physicality. And so we understand the relationships of mass and energy and motion. And all of this is transitory by field strength. And it's the same effect, regardless of which two field strengths you're talking about. So in other words, there is a transitory field strength between, say, the emotion mass and the mind mass. There's a transitory field strength between the spirit mass and the soul mass. This transitory field strength is between here and there. That's the point. And so when we're looking at heaven transition, and we want to see, are we up or are we down? No. The right hand is the giver, the left hand is the taker. You have to give to receive. And you can do this because you are already in a Magrath condition. But we have to fudge things up, don't we? Well, that has to stop, because when we look at the new atomic math, we see that according to the periodic table of elements, the neutron mass equals the proton mass plus the electron mass. However, in the plasma physics, we have to overcome this fudge factor. What's missing is the mass of the p-n6 and the total mass of the matter, antimatter, and dark matter. This is the totality. This is the totality that is the energy level, balance, and positioning through nearness and proximity, charge, gradient, and field strength. And so, and understand the difference when we look at the form artifacts that are on the leeward side, and this is what we worked hard to differentiate from the physical science from the new plasma science, which involves the carbogen, the aminogen, the plasmagen. These are all the study of nuclear decay, and we have crossed the watershed over to the other side. So now we understand that our point of view needs to be from the soul level to the physical level. It's the soul level which determines the physical level, right? And so as our point of view is following these energy packs, right? And so the dream energy of the spirit is the indomitable spirit. And these all come in packs, which are soul packs. That's one of the ways that energy travels. So this is how we talked about last week, the plasmagen giver and the plasmagen receiver. In one way, you're spellbound and earthbound. In another way, you are free and spacebound. And that's the plasmagen state. It's the change state. Not only the transmutation, but the transmogrification. And we're not saying in which domain. The transmutation of elements splits the light matter and the dark matter and creates light. In the physicality of this light is the manifestation of light mass. That's how we see the transmutation of energy. But we can transmute our physicality. Well, we can, butterflies can. They have transmuted into caterpillars, and from that physical point, they are transmuted again into butterflies. Isn't this amazing? So we see that our soul has a sequencing. All of this we've talked about today has a sequencing, how we see that the soul of the sun plus the soul of the earth has attracted the soul of the man. And so from there, the soul of the earth plus the soul of the man has attracted the soul of the body. And from there, the soul of the earth plus the soul of the body manifests into physicality of the body. And now we understand that the two sciences which were separate, the science of scientific verification and confirmation, and the spiritual science of confirmation, they are relationships that need to come together. And when we have a relationship that comes together, we call it a Magrav condition, the balance between the magnetical gravitational field forces. This is where the plasma science adds to the knowledge. So we see that in the matter plasma, there's a physical state and there's a plasmatic state. And, you know, we can dominate in whichever one we want. But the most important thing is that whichever state, whatever field that we have, is a manifestation. When these fields come together, whether it's in a stacker unit or in a universal cup or in a soul field or in space or wherever, any field formation is a manifestation. And it's the plasma feeding that leads to this manifestation. So this manifestation can be non-tangible or tangible, non-visible or visible, plasmatic or physical. Whichever reality it is a form artifact. And you can't see it, but you can see the results from it. And so this is why we have to cross the bridge, because even the emotion of presence is a form artifact of what? Energy and motion. And this is why the vision enhancement unit is so important, because when you see American soldiers or any soldiers who are armed to the teeth and ready to fight anybody and anything, they can't fight their own memories. And so our gift to the US military to overcome this PTSD problem is the vision enhancement units. They're sitting and waiting and ready to come, because they will do what's not visible, the plasmagen interaction, right? Which will enhance the soul and enhance the spirit and restore these patriots. Just like all of us. Yeah, we want to get back to nature, but all of us really want to get back to normal. And the normal is what the majority is doing. We are all seeking freedom and emancipation. That's what the fight is all about. But look in the universe. The universe is totally normal. It's us here on Earth who are seeking the freedom and emancipation. And it's available. It's right there. The plasmagen is a kind of energy state. Tell people that's what it is. It is a transcending the limitations of science, and we've got things backwards. The higher strength needs to feed the weaker strength. And these are all the matters that are involved. We start with the PM ticks and we end up with the field interaction on this planet. And it's not the fact that it's man-made that's the problem. It's the role of man and how man sees himself. And right now, we are conducting ourselves in a highly energy-binding, self-serving manner. And we're doing it at the expense of others. So this is abuse. And there is a penalty for that abuse, because something is always something as opposed to something else. And this is the rule of the universe. The universe has ethics because it's about life. It's about creation. And if you're going to create, then you want to create more. And that involves a discipline, morality, compassion, and courage, which we're going to talk about more in the new classes. But when we talk about the ethos of the universe, that involves ethical behavior abiding by universal laws. And ethical knowing is the common denominator that we all have on this planet. And we know this by connection, by connection. So we need to practice, it's called target practice. And we see that our dynamic transfer state has to help our physical destination state, but there's a feedback. And so that's the interaction between the soul of the man and the soul of the body. That's the connection. And we have to perfect the arts of dreaming, which facilitates the way the plasma energy is moving around that in many unseen ways. So this is how we can succeed in our target practice. We don't look at the form artifact, look at the energy transfer behind the form artifact. Understand we are going through a soul transition. We're between here and there. We will always be between here and there. But the difference is when we go from Earth space to outer space, we have to understand that it has to abide by the universal rules of the plasma state. And that involves the moral comforts, not just the creature comforts, but the moral comforts of man. And the ideas that we have and the wishes that we have in our heart. And they both involve courage and love. And it's hard to believe that you have to have the courage to love. So this is the advanced science. We started with a biology, then we went to a microbiology. We were going to talk about nanobiology. Now we've introduced also picobiology, because it's going to that vanishing point, the plasma biology, that point that you cannot see, which allows the transcendence, the transmutation, and the transition through various domains and dimensions beyond dream state. We already have the technology, and everyone's asking in the spiritual world, how can we connect and come to the greater oneness? This is the way. Understand that the energy transfer goes at the speed of life. And so when you look at the emblem of the Universal Council, you see that there is no physical reference. It's a plasmatic reference between here and there. And this is why the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute is calling all Earth patriots to bring peace through the World Peace Treaty, which we ask you to sign with a pen. And understand that when you do that with your heart, you will do that with the physical, emotional harmony and vitality that you deserve. That is the truth, and that is the thing that drives all patriots. The universal language of knowing, traveling at the universal speed of life. every patriot knows that the plasma science needs to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. Welcome, all patriots, and welcome to the new space age. Thank you all for listening to this presentation. This is the end of today's class. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. There was quite a lot there to comprehend. Very beautiful presentation, but I don't think I got it all. We can open up the floor to others. I think you might have wanted to call that advanced, very advanced biological knowing. I don't know what I can do with this.
You know, the worst part about this is the more you know, the more you realize how little you know.
I already know that.
We're trying to catch up to Mr. Cash. I'm trying to go as fast as I can, but I just feel like Fred Flintstone sometimes, you know, scratching my feet on the pavement.
Well, this is the new dimension we're moving into, isn't it? Where we're working together with the soul of the man and the soul of physicality without any intermediaries, let's say, even within ourselves, like our brain, for example, that always seems to be getting in the way of things, which sometimes we refer to as the monkey brain in a way. So we can change, you were saying, we can change our health by the introduction of a alkaline or acidic environment in a way? Or is this a magnetic field of alkaline or acidic?
So yes to both. You know, the alkaline acidic relationship is a magnetical gravitational relationship. Acidic is magnetical, alkaline is gravitational. But is the pH of 14 the highest pH?
No.
Well, they say that's what it is on this planet. So it is the pH of the physicality.
And then this idea of changing a virus to a bacteria and a bacteria back to a virus. I thought one was more of an energy package and the other one is more of something in the physicality level.
See, that's beautiful. So if you have a battery and you have energy in that battery, can you take that battery apart and see the energy? No, you can't. So where is this coming from? How do they change a bacteria to a virus? They can't. All they can do is change it into a form artifact of a virus. It's the virus that creates the form artifact. This is a key point.
Yes, no, I was thinking this could be used to basically manipulate the RNA in a way, or the DNA.
With what?
As far as putting this, whatever's been introduced into the body can be repositioned in a way, if you have the knowledge to be able to do it. And all those who have maybe taken something they didn't want to, we can reposition the system within the body in so many ways, if we understand how to do that. I know the universal unit works between the space gap between the soul of the man and the soul of physicality. And these magnetic fields get rebalanced in that space gap in some sort of way.
Right. So you change the environment, you've changed the gradient.
Yes, it just seems like it's beyond my knowing. I mean, it's not. The soul has a double PhD in this, but what's been presented here, I'm trying to put it together, and maybe someone else has a question.
So Mark.
Yes.
this is a key point. I've been wanting to do this class for a long time because, you know, the thing is that we're talking about energy packs. They're non-visible. You can't grab onto them. So anything that you do in the physical domain is not an energy pack. What you're doing in the physical domain is creating a condition. Let's put it this way. Let's say you're a carpenter. Wouldn't it be nice to have a woodworking shop? And so you bring in a table saw and you bring in some drills and glue and materials and stuff like that. Are you going to have furniture? No, you're not. Okay? All you have are the form artifacts and the conditions that would allow you to make furniture. And even if you put a guy in that place, will you have furniture? No, you will not, until there's a motivation and inspiration to start building. And where does that come from? And what is he going to build? And where does that idea come from? You can't look at the table saw and say, oh, you know, I want a table that's, 2 meters by 5 meters.
But this is where the material enhancement unit comes in, where we can wish for what we want. I think the same with the flight systems, where we can, through the emotions, we can create that, but that again is outside of this physicality you're speaking about, if I'm even understanding what you're saying.
Well, understand this: if I build a table with 2 legs and you build a table with 4 legs, I would say you're smarter and you have more skill than I do, because I'm an idiot for thinking that I can keep a table up with 2 legs. A 4-legged table is more stable. It's a stable table.
Yes, it rhymes.
Sorry. Oh, jeez. You know, this concept of our physical limitations limits our understanding, and yet it doesn't answer the questions of how we got here, where we were born, or what's going on. So, you know, from a personal experience, what I've discovered with too many scientists, the final answer is I don't know. And I don't want to know, and I don't know how to find out. And, you know, is that acceptable? And now we have, all of us here, we have this golden opportunity. And there's only a
Yes,
few.
some
There's
of
only
us
a
feel
few of
like
us.
that we don't know, but as it's been explained to us that we're here to enlighten everyone, even the ones that think they can't understand this knowledge.
Yeah, but
They're
you
gonna-
need to have the skill to do that. So through the 412 Knowledge Seekers workshops, that skill is being given through the educational Spaceship Institute, where we're giving people the opportunity to enhance their skills. You know, even just to make this presentation, just to bring all these pictures together on this PowerPoint. You know, when I started, you were at my first classes, you know, it was black and white. And it was text only. So you've seen a transition. Well, that is a representation of an increased skill set. But you didn't see the learning. You only seen the form artifact of the learning. So the learning and life is intimately related. And it's available to everybody. This is the other difference. So those who are feeling deficient, oh, I'm not a scientist, or I don't know this, or I don't know that. Yeah, you do. But you just have to change the environment that will facilitate your acquiring the skills necessary to do this. And how long will it take? I don't know. How big is large? There's no predetermined time frame. What has changed is the nearness and proximity to the advanced science. All of us have access to that now through the good graces of Mr. Cash and the foundation that he's created, the foundation that we all are working in and supporting it as if it's our own child and nurturing it thusly. And we're not nurturing it so that the Cash Foundation becomes stronger. We're nurturing it so that the people who are gravitating to the Cash Foundation are benefiting from that. That's the difference. Look to what you are creating with respect to your environment, not look to what you're receiving within your own hands. It's one of the reasons I personally don't like Christmas, because Christmas is 365 days plus a fudge factor every year, not just one day. And the way we've been doing it is you know, peace on earth and goodwill to men, one day a year. What a jip.
Right, and we all go buy gifts for others in the physicality, which is the wrong way to go about elevating the others as we're learning. I think Salomia has her mic open. She may want to come in.
Yes,
Thank you for
I
saving
try
me,
to.
Salomia.
Yes. So I love what Alex said, that every day is Christmas. And my song was about this, that in every day we will have Christmas, we will be a good person, a better person. So conclusion is that to be a better person, Christmas has to be every day. Anyway, but my question was related to active and inactive, everything, including genes, for example. Maybe epigenetics helps. I mean, epigenetics is environment conditions. If we change the condition, we can activate or inactivate gene, or maybe viruses. I don't know. I didn't understand very well what Mr. Alex said about this active and inactive. We have RNA virus and we have DNA viruses. We have two kinds, but both are related and has a premises in plasma. In quantum of energies, energy packages. Only one is physical and another is not. Okay, I will stop. Thanks, please.
You asked a great question, and you also answered your question. So by being in an RNA or a DNA state, you know that's in a post-amino acid state. So the virus as an energy pack is moving, it's flowing. It is always something. It is never nothing. So what you're talking about is the difference between the physical form artifact and the plasma state of the energy. So the physical form artifact is the residue, but it's left a footprint. But the energy keeps moving. So it has to make a decision on where it goes, and it's based on susceptibility. And it keeps on going. So it's either this or it's that, it's always going. So when you want to know the difference is the physical formation or the plasmatic transition. And so when people are talking about RNA viruses or DNA viruses, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, because if a virus is an energy pack, then to talk about viral structure, you're talking about a condition. You're not talking about the energy. It's like talking about a battery. Is the battery a 1.5 volt battery, or is it the 9 volt battery, right? And so you're talking about the structure. So that's the difference. We are talking about the energy in motion, and as such, we see from our GANs that we've been able to elevate the energy level from the physicality into the GANs. We've seen that. And even if we don't understand that, we've seen the rotating fields within the GANs, which was created by some mystical, magical energy force that came, from a big box store. No, it didn't. It came from, well, the big box store of the universe. How about that? And the universe is energy in motion, and it is benevolent, and will give you what you need when you need it, because when you need it is based on susceptibility, right? Need is a susceptible condition. If you need it, then you should get it. But in terms of physicality, we have an interference factor. That is the delay in consequences. And the delay in consequences is the physical manifestation. But we're going to talk about that so-called deficiency next month. Or right now, when someone talks to you and says, this is what this is, well, you have to decide, is it a physical form artifact or is it energy in motion? And you have all the tools that you need to decide that. And once you decide that, then you know what the substructure is. It is the substructure that supports the structure. So you decide what you want to look at. This becomes the overriding point of today's discussion that I brought up today. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for the answer.
I hope someone else has a question here or a comment they'd like to make. Does this mean if we understand part of this or some of this, we can become our own doctors in a way?
Well, if you're asking me, Mark, so the answer is yes. But
Yes. Mhm.
each of us has a different skill set. So the thing is based on, well, let's put it this way. You and I don't know everything. So there are many schools, and there's many vocations, there's many subjects. But how can you know about one subject and without training? And so what a lot of people like to do is they disqualify you from that subject and say, oh, well, like one of the things that my dad told me is never tell a mechanic how to fix the car, because he'll fix it your way and it could cost you a fortune, right? So that's why there is a mechanic. However, if, let's say, the mechanic were to treat the car the way some people treat their limbs, let's say, and you say, oh, you know, Mr. Mechanic, I have a defective front wheel. Well, that's okay. We're just going to amputate the front wheel because you still have 3, right? Well, would you think that that's a good solution, acceptable solution? Do you really think that's a good solution? But we have laws in place that would prohibit that from happening because that would make your car dangerous. So you know that by amputating a wheel on your car would lessen the capability of the car. And it wasn't the fault of the 4th wheel that caused the problem. All that does is it removes the form artifact of the problem. You see what I'm saying? So if, you know, hypothetically you go to, well, this, you know, like I went to the doctor and the doctor says, you know, we have to radiate you. Well, I had no basis of knowledge to be able to come to a decision as to whether or not that was correct. But I did know that one of the recommendations was to take drugs for the rest of my life. And so the question was, in my mind, this I did know, did I get sick because I failed to take man-made drugs? And the answer is obviously no. So I got sick for a reason, but I didn't know what the reason was. The doctor didn't know what the reason was. The baker didn't know what the reason was, but I went to the baker because at least I could get a strawberry muffin while I was thinking about what I was going to do. And in the end, I made the right decision. Not 100%. And I had a lot of regrets. But you know what? Now that we know how life is created, and we know that it is plasmagen bound, oh, wait a second. What is that connected to? Well, that is connected to the same system that you were born with. And when I was born like all of you. I had everything plus a nurturing mom. And somehow, some way, I made it through the jungle. And I don't know how I did it, because there were a lot of scary moments. But you see, your soul is your guide, and your soul is your friend. And I didn't know that. And then one of the problems that I had was that at a very young age, I had a strong aversion to Sunday school, because I found that the Sunday school teacher did not care about my welfare as much as he cared about my attendance. And when I was sick and I couldn't attend, they got very upset. And so here we are on Sunday, and just a thought occurred to me yesterday that these are Sunday classes. And it was a shock to my system.
Your attendance has been perfect.
I am. I don't know if to be proud or to be ashamed.
You know, I heard an interesting phrase I read it. It said, those who dream during the day have a distinctive advantage over those who only dream at night. And you can take from that what you will.
As I say, we're going into uncharted skies, and if you're following me, you take your chances. But I hope you're enjoying the ride anyway.
And why was this microscope illegal? 30,000 magnification, or was that back years ago that it was illegal? I thought that was an interesting point. You said this microscope was illegal.
No, it is.
Well, 30,000 times doesn't sound like a lot of
No,
magnification.
the one that he has is 125,000. 125,000 magnification.
So they didn't want you to know what's going on in the pico or the smaller world? Is that why it was illegal?
I don't know. I can't think the way they think. It's mind-boggling why that would be illegal, but it is. And the thing is, really, that a lot of people don't know why. If I want to tell you, okay, well, here's what I can tell you. There's been a lot of discussion with respect in the dental industry with respect to amalgam fillings. And when I first found out about this microscope, that there were 13 of them in existence. And I believe 11 of them were in the United States, and they were being used by dentists. So you can imagine the ramifications there. But, again, it's energy binding at the expense of others, isn't it? So you and I can do, we're long in the tooth. We have skills. We can do any job. Do you have to do a job that is at the expense of others, or can you do a job that is at the enhancement of others? And say, well, I can make more money screwing people than I can by helping people. Okay. And in the end, how much do you need?
Yeah.
Yeah. How much do you need to have peace with your soul? And this is the problem. This is the problem that American patriots have. This is why talented soldiers who are trained and armed to the teeth, end up often themselves because, there's not enough money in the bank. There's never enough money in the bank. I don't know. It doesn't matter how much you have in the bank, because now you have to rationalize. You have to come to, your own judgment. Your own accounting. Well, all of us are going to have to do that. Okay, so all of us have a capability of making this choice. So, if you want to do it that way, just remember, all the people you step up on the way up the ladder, will be glad to lend you a helping hand coming down. And you take it for however you want to interpret that. But,
Okay, while you warm your tea, is there anyone here for the first time that'd like to share their name and where they're from? We always ask this, and if anyone's here for the first time, please share with us where you're from, and if you'd like to add anything. Okay, I guess you're preaching to the choir in a way today. We don't have any new people, apparently. But we are becoming more enlightened over the time, and this is the time of enlightenment. And again, another cycle of enlightenment starting in February, which is very beautiful. And again, it's understanding more about ourselves and our capabilities and the creator and so on. So when you talk about these energies moving, I'm beginning to think that all these energies moving are in a way light and in a way Mitra, or this process of creation, or the mother of creation. Would you agree in that thought, or what is your thought about that? Because all the light is energies, and energies in motion, and that would do something with the creation, which would revert back to Mitra in a way.
See, unlike you, as a North American, I'm ignorant. And, it was astounding to me, excuse me. Hello. It was astounding to me, for instance, that I thought the most read book in the world was the Bible. And then when I found out that it was the Tao Te Ching, and I said, well, wait a second, if that's the most read book in the world, how come I haven't read it? I mean, I've read a lot of books, but to read the most read book in the world, and I never heard of Taoism or anything else like that. And frankly, I am totally embarrassed to admit this, but just like you, and I'm glad you admitted it, but I didn't understand Mitra. But what I did understand was about light, and that I can answer your question, you see, because the thing about it is that the light is a manifestation of the energy in motion. However, if it's in the physicality, then it's the colors of light that we can see. And when we look at the spectrum, we can see that there's beyond the blue spectrum and there's below the red spectrum. And beyond those spectrums, the light's not visible, but we know that the light is there. So it means that our knowledge is not, advanced enough. And if that light can go into those other spectrums, then maybe it can do other things. And then when I found out that, there's a spirit light and a soul light, that changed everything.
Yes, and I was wondering about this completion of this cycle between the creator and Mitra. Does that mean the light is returning from its source in a way? As we know, the rain comes from the clouds and goes back to, and so forth and so on. So if we had a circle that wasn't closed and now the cycle is going to be completed, does that mean the circle is closed now? And this energy from the light of the creator is then returning to the creator. I was wondering about that earlier in the last few days, when we start to hear more about Mitra as a light or an energy. And again, the light doesn't have to be visible, the ray, so to speak, and most of them are probably not visible. So I was wondering what this means about completing a cycle.
Well, I'll try and answer that in my own way. The thing is that we now know that we have a deficiency on this planet. And that corresponds very well with the fact that we have nuclear decay. But when we're looking at the elements, the one thing that we don't understand is the purity of it. So we fudge things, we say, oh, well, it's like if you say copper wire and, someone says, okay, well, that's copper, but they're not telling you that it has other amalgams in there. And so, maybe it's 80% copper. Well, okay, so it's 80% copper, but you still call it a copper wire. Okay, well, I understand that until you get into the food business. And the food business, as you know, when you look at the labels, at least this is the way it's supposed to be in North America, or the first ingredient on the label is the largest ingredient, right? And then it's gotten to the point now where the different ingredient is the label, like it's gotten backwards. And I caught them doing this in a certain brand of dog food, where they would say that one is beef, one is chicken, and one is pork. And it wasn't the first ingredient, it was the fifth ingredient. And, the regulators of the labels allowed that. To me, that's misrepresentation. Okay, so if you were to say that I'm asking for a copper wire and you have, let's say, 10% aluminum in there, you wouldn't call it an aluminum wire. I would say that, no, you're lying. It's a copper wire, but it doesn't indicate purity, and that's the point. We don't have purity on this planet. That's why we only have 80% of the energy coming from us, and that purity is the limitation of the physicality. But what is the offsetting 20%? It's called choice. It's called choice. You have a free will to make choice. You take the choice and you take the free will and you combine them together and you will have purity. And with respect to that purity, then you become radioactive. And so we are radioactive beings, but we're just operating in a very low level energy. And we're doing this because that difference we're compensating by sucking off of others, where we're finding energy from others at their expense, but failing to understand that it's binding energy. If it's binding from the person you're stealing it from, it's binding to you. Hello. And that's the penalty. And because the penalty is part of the delay in consequences, it says, out of sight, out of mind. Really? You're out of your mind. If you don't see, if you don't understand that you were born to this planet and you don't know why, then you have a problem. So, and that's the choice that we all have. So, welcome to the Plasma Gen Travel Agency. We are all soul travelers, and this is a tremendous revelation to understand that, all of a sudden, if you're depressed, understand your life has a purpose. You have a reason for being, a sense of being, and an ability to understand that nobody has the right to abuse your soul. Your soul will not accept any abuse. And this is a universal law, and there is no man-made law that can override a universal law. That is the law. So I'm just going to step off the...
Yeah, and you say about that 20% short, I understand that it can be taught tomorrow, where we could learn how to position our physicality in different ways and twists and turns, perhaps, and that we could do that. But it was said that what good is it until, if we don't have the soul elevated? So we could make up that 20% tomorrow. None of us would be short, but apparently it's wouldn't do much good until these two souls get to working together in a way. And maybe it would even be detrimental. I'm not sure. The sudden, Doug has put in the chat, since he can't speak at the moment, the sudden appearance of the Corona energy packs coming from the creator is only to show people a new way to live without being subservient to false superior leaders. The more tricks they pull out of the bag, the more people reject these tricks. My humble understanding of Mr. Keshe's teaching in 412th Knowledge Seekers Workshop.
And if I may add to that, thanks very much, Doug, that was excellent. If I may add to that, you see, one of the reasons that we've been isolated on this planet is because of our poor conduct and our poor understanding. As our understanding is increasing, then our overall conduct is improving. It's a mandatory direct, how we say, cause and effect. It becomes mandatory because at that point in time, the one thing that people always do is not only will they lie to others, but they lie to themselves. And you know how you feel when you get lied to. Well, how do you feel when you lie to yourself? That has got to be the worst feeling of all. And it's very lonely. It's a tremendously lonely experience. So I believe, and as such, I act accordingly, as I believe that we are getting assistance from many different directions. And the thing is that we can't choose which directions we get this from. that becomes a form of telling the universe to shut up. So we are now, I believe that we are getting this. So let's put it another way. The universal body enhancement system is an assist for us to, shall we say, transport our bodies. We're getting the spaceship units to be able to transmutate between various domains, right? So these are all assists. Can we do it without that? Obviously, there are beings that can. Okay, we don't have that skill set. We haven't devised that skill set. So in the meantime, you know, this is a good way to go, except that we should have done this 12,000 years ago when the first opportunity appeared. And, you know, we keep kicking the can down the road, down the road, down the road. However, our knowledge wasn't there. And so slowly and surely, you know, we gained the knowledge. Let me put it to you this way. I knew about this decades ago, but do you think I could conduct a meeting like this decades ago? We didn't really have the technology. We didn't have the facility. We tried in many respects, but there was a limit to the field strength that could emanate from that. So, you know, we're talking to a handful of people today, but this is recorded. And at some point in time, others will hear it at when the appropriate time. So even if it's one more, it just shows you it's an increase in field strength right there. But that's not limited to that. It could be replayed over and over and over again. And so this was one of the things, and then people didn't understand, oh, Alex, you know so many things. Oh, yeah? Well, I spent, you know, several thousand hours learning. How many hours did you spend? Oh, I have to wash my car. You know, well, so you make a choice. You decide what you want to do. Okay. So, I mean, and I'm not bragging. I'm just saying, you know, I wanted to learn. What about Jalal? Do you know how hard Jalal works? What about Marie? Do you know how hard she works? You don't. And it doesn't matter. Okay. All what you see is the result. Okay. But it's not your choice. It's their choice. And they choose to give. And it's through that you get the blessing. And then do you respect that? And if you respect that, then you open. Then you open and allow to receive. That's the way the universe works, okay? The universe will give. You have to take. But you don't decide. You only take what you need. And the universe will provide. And in turn, you can do more from your MAGRAF positioning.
And sometimes the universe intervenes as well, as he asked the nations to pledge to peace, or he said, we'll make it for you to happen, or we'll make it happen for you. So the universe sometimes does intervene, and these interventions are very good, especially of what we've seen, the whole change in position in the last week or so in Vienna.
And they've been reluctant to intervene, right? It's
Oh,
like,
yes, they're observers more than
yeah, but you know,
interventionists.
who likes to get dirty? It's, you know, that's why I say, you know, it's time for us to get dirty also, because you know, we all like to be clean, but you know, the planet needs cleaning. And you know, when at the end of the day, if you spend all day cleaning your house, guess what? Your house is cleaning and you're filthy.
Well, we see Mitra standing, I think, upon the lotus flower, and that's another anomaly in a way. It grows in this very muddy and dirty, sort of swampy areas, but yet the petals are perfectly clean and white. And that's a very interesting thing. So I don't know how dirty Mitra gets, but she's standing on top of this, what appears to be a lotus flower, which are always very pure and white. Maybe there's different colors of lotus too, I'm not sure, but that's just my understanding. I don't know how dirty, and they don't mix it up in the physicality, so to speak, but through the fields, things get accomplished and positions change.
You really notice that with real estate agents, you know, if they are showing your house, you know, you want to make sure that all your plants, if you have any plants, that they're nice and healthy, and if they're not, throw them out, get them out. Got to be clean. Plants are dirty.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to come in? I want to thank everyone for bringing your questions or your thoughts, and even on the silent line of communication is just fine as well. But we do like to hear from you periodically. I have picked the cycle of creation to end with, Alex. I know you had talked about that, where science meets the soul of the man, but that was the, because of Mitra and this understanding, and we see these rays going across the universe. I think with this new enlightenment and the understanding more, the video becomes more meaningful to all of us. And that's what I've chosen to end the class with today.
I totally agree with you, Mark. And on that note, I just want to take this opportunity before someone else comes in, is to thank everybody for allowing me to do these presentations. And I hope you've enjoyed them, that they've been a tremendous benefit to me. So I have a lot of selfish benefit that is derived from it. But I really hope that it's helped all of you who've listened, and it'll manifest in its own way. So that's no problem. There are no preconditions. It's been this is the last class of this year, and as such, when we go into the new year, we're already past the line in the sand, so to speak, and we have plans. And I hope that you assist us in fulfilling our wishes of bringing peace, health, and prosperity to everyone here. And thank you, Mark. Can't tell you how much I appreciate your efforts, and to all the knowledge seekers part of the Keshe Foundation. A big fat thank you. I can't thank you enough.
Okay, and we did have another request for help, so we're going to address that somewhere in Newark, I believe, New Jersey. And I used to live in New Jersey, and I used to work in Newark as well. At least I had accounts there. So we're going to meet this person's needs in the next few days. We're going to talk more about it later. But in the last workshop, Mr. Keshe said we have about 200 years to complete this cycle, which seems like a long time, but maybe, as he said, as sticky as our brains are in understanding or getting connected too much to emotions, we're one of the slowest animals he's ever seen to, I guess, actuate these changes that have been proposed or that's here. So we do have a period of time to get everything. And of course, he said the universal community would be here and guiding us through this next couple hundred years of realigning things, I guess, in the correct manner. So it may not be as instantaneous as many of us would like to see, but it's, again, step by step, slowly, and a process that this planet and this creation is going through.
I have some good news for you.
Great.
So the first time I heard this particular point, it was only 30 years. So something in the last 3 years has either my hearing's gone bad or the number went from 30 years to 200 years. So I hope it's 200 years at least, and maybe through our actions we can increase that. So
I think it's going to be a joyous 200 years as we start to move into this. And again, who could forget 2021? But what was told to us is that you will not remember the bad parts of 2021 and maybe 2020 as well. So we're into a beautiful time with a lot of smiling faces, and many start to become interested in this knowledge. So I think all of us will be tapped by our friends, our relatives, and people we don't know to share this knowledge. I think they're going to be hungry for it once they see, and as Mr. Kesh has told us, that the leaders had needed a leg up in a way. And I think they were shown something, or they were given some sort of documentation or videos that what the capabilities of some of this technology and the possibilities are. So we're going to have a very beautiful time by the end of 2022 or before, that we won't even remember 2021 and all the
So I should put
mayhem.
a smiley face on this.
Always. It's actually less muscles to smile than it is to frown.
Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come in here and ask a question or state an opinion? I can't believe everyone is quiet. But we're again blessed to be able to see some of this knowledge in a way the others can't. But again, not to lord it over anyone or we're any better, but to start to share it. We've just been blessed in a way that we've been able to see in a different dimension up to this point. Some of the knowledge of the creation and the creator, past what many of the lies that have been delivered to us. And all these are going to be opened up even by souls who have been here and seen it. And I think we all know who that could be. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. And again, any other opportunities? Jefferson, you put something very interesting in the chat. If I can just back it up a little bit and see where that was. I had read it earlier. Well, today is the, okay, yes. Well, today is the 6th day of Mitra celebration. I have felt the best energy and magnetism from all planets, stars, and of course the sun. Let's elevate, enjoy, and be in the awareness of these 12 days of celebration. And I think we will continue this celebration of Mitra, since most of us have probably never done it or even to understood what it was all about. And again, I'm just basically having a first sort of taste of this Mitraism, even though it's 7,000 years old. It was hidden quite well. Yes, Lisbeth, do you want to add something? I see your mic is open.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Wrong.
No,
Thank you so
no
much.
problem. No problem.
It's okay. I remember today is back, yes, back 5 plus 3 of flash plus 1, and for conversations, and continue unifying the souls all
Yes.
these days, for
Yes.
because actually we are the soul of peace.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, and continue your holidays. Enjoy the holidays for all planets. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mitra is here with us, and the creator is here with us. So everything is going to go into the correct balance. But again, it's going to be a period of time. It's not going to be this magic wand, which I was wondering. But we're all going to get enlightened. And another cycle, again, I keep saying on the 22nd of February, another cycle of enlightenment starts to happen. So maybe we'll see some new understandings or things we haven't even imagined that we could be understanding or even partake in. Jalal, I believe, will be holding class tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. CET. tea time. So all of you who are available, please join and be part of another class. A new teachings will probably be starting when classes resume. I don't know exactly the format or how we're going to proceed, but it'll be more of a dispersal of this knowledge across this planet. And as we can see in the condition we're in, with our knowledge being quite low, it's needed to be taught, and it's needed to be shared, and it's needed to save life. And it's not only here, apparently in the universe, it's needed as well. So this is some of our functions, I think, that we'll be doing in the future time, as we bring these two souls together into a perfect citizen. And also the universe is being changed in a way as well. And when he says it's going to happen in the very near future, sooner than anyone, well, again, we know the time frames that we have and the time frames the universe have are sometimes, even though there's no time, out of the matter state, can be quite different in appearance. But it is going to happen, and it is being delivered, and hopefully the world leaders have come to their right mind and to see that this is the way forward for the entire planet, as one planet, one nation, one race, for world peace and justice. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to play the cycle of creation, which is about 17 minutes, and many of you have heard it before. And maybe this time when you listen to it again now or at another time, you can find that on the Keshe Foundation's YouTube playlist. It starts to take a little different meaning than it had before the 21st, for example, as we become more enlightened about ourselves, the creator and the creation. Would anyone like to add anything? Yes.
Yes, it's time for say thank you so much for you, Mark. All year, work with us all the time. Alex, Gerard, many people come all the time with for Mr. Keshe, obviously, and all the time with us. So Marie, many people, Universal
Yes.
Council all the
Yes.
time.
Yes,
Help.
thank you. Thank you for all of us.
Many
Again,
thank you.
we're all a cell, just like you are, Elizabeth. We're all a cell in this structure, and it's up to you to decide which position and how you fit into it. No one's going to force you into position, and if you're not happy with this position, you can change positions, for example. But again, we're all part of it now. We're all a cell in this structure, and it's up to us as individuals to decide where you fit in and how much you want to serve humanity. And this will relate into other positions that you'll take probably. But again, no one's forced to do anything, as I understand it, in this foundation. It's all up to what you want to do and where you find your balance and what position you'd like to assume. I would like to ask if Mr. Keshe would like to come in and share anything at this point. I know he's been here for a few hours, so don't know if he's at the microphone or away.
Good evening. No, I've just been listening. Thank you very much for inviting me. No, it was a beautiful presentation from Alex. He brings a different dimension to understanding technology, but it needs a lot of deeper understanding of it to be able to present it like this. Then hopefully we are very hopeful to have Alex as part of the institute, which is getting set up as what we call the lecturers or teachers in teaching this world scientist, which is a different caliber of work altogether. Thank you very much for all your hard work. It was a very beautiful presentation. It's amazing how what we leave to be understood is understood and explained in an even complicated but simpler way that in the future more people will understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, I was wondering, yes, about this completing the cycle. I know you said you've completed the cycle, Mr. Kesh, several times. And now that Mitra's here, you said this is going to be the completion of another cycle. Does Mitra actually return into the creator, or does she stay as a separate soul? What does this mean?
It's the completion of the whole structure. In the next few weeks, we go in more detail into it because there's a lot of things in the background happening. And we expect a lot of things to take place in the next very near future coming time. And then if you listen to the last Thursday and Thursday before, the very detailed information has been given for those who will understand it. Extremely detailed, but in a very short burst. Because when we're deciding to even disclose this knowledge, we were not sure if anybody will understand it and how much value they put on it, or how they accept it and how they will apply it. Like when we spoke about RNA of the magnetic fields, or what it is as a memory of, which replicates it. This is unknown fact, it's unknown knowledge, and it'll take a long time for man to understand this. When you send a radio message, it doesn't make a picture at the end of it. It's just replication of it. When you send a magnetic field in the plasma direction, it'll make a structure of itself with all the information. It's not just a noise, it's not just a vibration. And it will take a long time for it to be understood. Where the magnetic field itself becomes what we call the DNA. We spoke about a light, if it's a field or is it a photon or what we call the particle. The same goes with magnetic fields. And if one understands that, then you understand what will be in the time to come to be understood more of. When Alex speaks about 30 years, that was for a different dimension and a reason that stays at 30 years. What we call the cycle, this 200 years, is for maturity to understand the next cycle. And it needs only one generation to cover that 200, which means by the maturity of the cycle of the next cycle of life, the souls will mature to understand the new. It's you look at the life as a 60 or 80. We look at the one cycle of life at the point of maturity. Then 200 years is nothing. People will live into 400 and 600 and 1,000 years. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello, Mr. Kesh. Can you tell us about Enki, Enlil, and Marduk, about them? Can you explain us a little bit more about them? Last time when you were teaching, you told about the banking system. Some Lord teach you about Enki system. Who is Enki, who is Enlil, who is Marduk? Can you tell us? And what is the relation right now? What is happening? They have any relation or not?
Sorry, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can you explain more, please?
Who is Enki? And who is Enlil? And who is Marduk?
I don't understand exactly what you're talking about. That's what I'm asking.
The gods apparently came here to mine gold. This is Enki and his brother Enlil, something like this. I've read this story. And apparently they enslaved man to be gold miners, and they needed gold. And the whole story to me sounds totally preposterous. If they came from the universe, they know how to create gold or extract gold from asteroids or whatever they want to do. She's asking you if you can explain more about these supposedly two brothers who are depicted as giants in some of the reliefs as compared to the man, for example, but the whole idea was to mine gold, which to me sounds totally preposterous.
I don't know, so I cannot explain anything. Years ago, I came across a knowledge seeker, Dr. Elia Kostova.
Eu estou numa live aqui, por isso que eu não estou podendo atenção para você direito.
Somebody's opened the microphone. Can you close the microphone?
Yes, sorry.
And she was telling us that somebody's interfering, opening microphone, that they come from other planet, other places in the universe, because Earth is a highly valued property, real estate. And those days, we could not explain, and I tried to explain. People with the knowledge, which now we have opened, even in the past few weeks, unless you're a man of a state of physicality, if you understand the process of the creation, you don't need to go and dig anywhere. This shows that's how people used to think. And so they riddled about it, that it made sense to them that there are people here to come and take. If you have a material enhancement unit, if you have the knowledge, you don't need to go and dig anything. Not even now on this planet. There is a lot to teach. There is a more advanced system than the present material enhancement unit, which I don't really know how even to explain that such a technology exists. In a very simple way, some 2 or 3 years ago, I referred to it, and I saw from a few knowledge seekers questions which baffled me, and I thought knowledge seekers are not ready for this. There are much more advanced systems than what we have on the table. But for the time being, let's get what is on the table for people to see and work and see. And for them to understand much, much more advanced technologies. And once you know these things, you can create the soul of a stone. Why do you need to make the stone? And at the moment you're in what they call maze of making matters, and we're trying to show you we can create energy from matters. But once advanced technology, which we'll introduce maybe in the coming time, you can create the soul of a stone. Do you even need the matter state of the stone? Doesn't matter what it's made of. And part of the teaching of the last Thursday is heading that way. So, if the giants been here to dig the gold, that was a very good fairy tale story for people who understand the dimension of physicality. When we went to one of the major corporations, and they would not see us in their offices because they were scared of seeing us or anybody see us in their offices. They met us in their the staff canteen. And when I finished after about, I knew the head of the company was on the line listening to the people we were talking to. We finished, explained to them what is going to change in their company. By the time we left the yard, we received a call. We are invited to come to the headquarters tomorrow to see everything, because the knowledge we have compared to what you have is nothing. Where a few hours before, they didn't want us to pass their canteen. And by the time we finished, they realized the knowledge they have, which is one of the most advanced technologies in the world in a way, was nothing. And they put the experts on the table, and next day at 10 o'clock we were invited to be at the headquarters at the highest point of research, because they understood there is a change. And there's going to be a change. So when you speak about these giants coming and digging gold, it was a good fairy tale story for people who believed you need giants to come and dig out. Now you have the enhancement unit. So if you understand it now, at the moment you're in matter state of it, but if you understand what is to come, you don't even need that state of it. It's a long way to go yet.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us, Mr. Kesh. You're always enlightening all of us, which is a beautiful position to be in. Someday we will replicate it, hopefully sooner than later, but we do have a long way to go. This knowledge is so vast and so immense. Again, even systems beyond the materials enhancement systems. So currently there's many steps to reaching the level of the creator per se. But we're approaching it, and we're interested in it, and we want to be there. So thank you for enlightening the entire planet with your systems and with your knowledge. And again, it's to be shared. I noticed I picked up about what you said about your ethos, that this knowledge must remain free to everyone. And it's not to be abused, to make money on, and to charge and get rich over, even though at one point you said you hope others achieve the level of wealth you've achieved. So, but that may be at a different point in time. So thank you again for always enlightening all of us equally. And again, it's up to us to take from it what we can and what we can understand. So thank you all. I'll play the cycle of creation, and as I said, hopefully we can relate it to what's been shared with us about this enlightenment or the light, and seeing Mitra as this light of creation of the whole systems, the whole universe in a way, these lights that emitted from the creator and so on. So we're just, again, in the kindergarten, but we're learning more and more as the days and weeks and time goes by. And it's a very beautiful journey for all of us. I want to thank all your souls for bringing you here today. It's been a holiday, and next week we're going to continue more with Mitra and start this understanding. We don't just have to celebrate the 12 days. We can start celebrating the presence and the birth of Mitra all the time, as it's been hidden from me for my whole life, and probably many of you as well, because we've all followed a different paths, which were told were the right paths, but again, they ended up cashing out our pockets and our souls. But now we have a new dimension of understanding, and we want to push that again across this whole planet and across this entire unicos. So thank you all. Let me see if I can bring this up. I'm going to play the cycle of creation. Sorry about that. I was, let's see, here we are. Let me just enlarge it. That was Solomia. I actually copied her post in the chat, and I think there was an interruption in there at one point, but you can see where she's put this into the chat. She's made some recordings or a playlist for us to listen to. So thank you all again. Again, your souls know what they're doing, and they've brought us all here, and there'll be more and more as the days and weeks and the months pass. And the knowledge will just be so enlightening that we're going to forget many of the things that we thought were so important to us, and whatever we thought was so important to us. And we're going to run closer to this knowledge rather than what we're leaving behind. And hopefully we don't miss it either. And again, this operation between the level of energy and the level of physicality is another beautiful change of the entire structure of the entire creation. So I don't even think we all realize what we have in front of us or what we're dealing with at this point, but we're trying. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and let's hear the cycle of creation. I want to make sure I'm sharing the screen properly. And it, again, is 17 minutes long. I'm going to play the final disclaimer, and then the meeting will end. So if anyone wants to come in with anything else at this point, please feel free.
I would like to share something what is in my mind about Mitra, if I'm allowed.
Yes, you first and then Jalal.
Okay, thank you. Ladies first. I have the feeling that Mitra is energy, a magnetic field of the creator, and this energy emanated also is able to create other fields, and these fields of energy creates all all physicality, all the creation. So creator is like a cup, and Mitra is a content of this cup. This fields of energy on my mind is like a spiral, is like a Fibonacci series of number, means growing and growing. The principle of fecundation is a secret hidden in everything on this universe and universe. And she is also ray, because we know how we create plasma from rays, divine rays. And I have the vision when Mr. Kish last Thursday start to talk about Mitra. I was in alpha or maybe in delta state, and I have seen a light, golden light, but also like a star. So the light, it was in the middle of the star, like a fontana of light from this star. So because my Mitra just appear like this. I was so happy because I received this answer.
Yeah.
I don't know if I am correct or not, but it was on my vision and on my emotions also. Thank you very much for listening me. Maybe I was asking you for confirmation if I am right or not.
We missed part of your words. If you listen to the recording, you'll see your connection was going in and out at various points. So we didn't catch everything. But apparently, if Mitra is the mother of creation, wherever we look and wherever we see, this is the evidence of Mitra. So whether you're looking at the sun, the stars, the galaxy, the trees, the plants, the other human beings, this is all from Mitra, as she is the mother of creation, which came from the creator as a ray or as a light. Jalal, are you still present?
Yes, thank you, Mark. Hi, everyone. Good evening and Merry Christmas, all of you. I wish all the best from the teaching for all of you. I have a simple question. I hope it is simple to Mr. Cash, if I may. It's about MS. Is that disease what we call MS? It is where the nerve goes from conductor to resistor, and is it all the time like this? All the MS disease is like this? Disconnect?
You're referring to multiple sclerosis. Yes?
Yes.
This disease, this condition is not a disease, is the wish to disconnect. Is the emotion which triggers the physicality. And it is connected to abuse. No one we know with MS is without abuse, emotional abuse, and is connected to the mother. We've done a lot of work on this. We actually closed the book of MS and ILS some 4 or 5 years ago when we understood it fully. And it's the wish and the abuse which brings it, especially from the one who we considered to be loved. And then MS has 2 directions. is totally associated with abuse. And the wish to be in that position.
With the attention seeking,
It's a kind of HC, or what we call AD, with the HC taken out of it. It's extremely hard to reverse. I know this because we have worked on a couple of cases over 12 years ago, extremely bad wheelchair-wise and everything. And once explained, the person understands it, they can bring some changes. Then they can block it or they can freeze it at the point. And I, as recent as 3-4 weeks ago, had a message from somebody which we helped over 14 years ago, still alive and off the wheelchair. She just happened to come on the, what do you call it, on one of the chats. Because once they understand it, they can reverse or bring emotion to stop. Unless you want to do it because of the emotion, you choose that path to go paralyzed, to get attention, to be there. That is me, not something else you expect of me. It is a very, you have to understand psychosomatic, how to handle the psychological side and how to handle the somatics, the physical side. There's no use working on the physicality. You lose physiotherapies and everything else. You have to understand the psychology of the whole structure, and the physicality just walks off it. At the moment, the doctors just deal with physiotherapy, keeping you mobile. You got to remember something very, very important, especially those of you who are at this level, that go back to the videos of 2-3 years ago when we didn't show the gentleman in China being in a wheelchair and in 2-3 days walking, if you remember.
yes.
You try, or we done the same with, even you've seen it with Naomi. You try somebody who's been flat, paralyzed for months, to walk them off the bed and the wheelchair within a day or two. It's, doctors tell you it's impossible, because you have to go through all sorts of physiotherapy jobs to do, to massage and to exercise. And how come the people we handle, being in the wheelchair, not being able to move, to just walk off after 2 or 3 days? Nobody has explained this, and I put it to many, many doctors and physicians. You put somebody on a flat for years, and within a few days, you make them to walk. Why does it happen? To the present knowledge of the medicine, it's impossible. The same is with MS. You have to touch the soul of the cell, the soul of the man, and the physicality just a puppet. Again, go back to a few months ago, I explained this, and Giovanni is there, and you can check and talk to him, and there you see it. Naomi being a month in bed, not moving, she was dancing like a puppet. Because we touch the soul. You have to understand it. You have to understand the interaction of soul of physicality and soul of the man, and you, if you can strengthen it, the physicality follows. So with MS, don't look at conductivity or if his nerves connected or not. You have to sort out the psychology of it first. They just woke up.
This one is not yet paralyzed. It is the earliest stages of it.
Doesn't matter, even if in the last stage, if you can reach to understand the soul, you can reach the man, man will walk off.
Thank you, Mr. Cash.
Thank you very much. You know, we are not medicine men. We understand the operation of the soul. And that's the medicine to the whole of the physicality. Otherwise, you'll be keep on creating vaccines, injections, and tablets.
We are asking only for knowing the reasons, and when you don't know the reasons, everything will be.
No, it's not knowing the reason. It's for the person to accept the reason to themselves. They verbally tell you yes, but inside they don't accept. They're just wasting your time. They're absolutely wasting your time. It should not take you more than a day to get the MS version of the wheelchair. If to understand the reasons why they made themselves to that point.
Conflict with the cultures, Mr. Cash, especially with what I know, coming from religious background to Europe, and see diversity of doing things. And
no, really, these things are masks. The reality is far deeper than that. Especially people who go this way, you have to go in a deeper way of understanding them understanding their own reasons. This is why we say we are not doctors and we don't treat. We process for them to understand the process of what they've done to themselves.